All right, everybody, thank you so much for being patient. My name is Hudson Villeneuve. I'm the Federal Government Affairs Coordinator for the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. We have a great panel here today to talk about local action, and I'm really, really excited because while I may talk to all of the congressional delegation now for my day job, I come from an activist background, and I know that is actually how we get this work done. It's grassroots organizing from the ground up that creates the demand for the change that we need. So we have an excellent panel here today. I just want to go over what our goals are, and I want people to be thinking throughout this panel of questions to ask, because we're going to have an audience section at the end. So think about that, keep it in your pocket for the end when we do the audience section. So today, we want to update you about what is happening on a community level in Michigan. We want to explore what true community engagement looks like, explain the difference between people-centered solutions versus industry-centered solutions, boo, and discuss the importance of diversity at decision-making tables within organization leadership. Now, forgive me, I'm on my phone, I'm Gen Z. What are you gonna do about it? You can't do anything, that's the answer. So I'm gonna introduce our awesome panelists. We have, first we're gonna do intro, we're gonna clap, and then everyone's gonna do a 2-minute intro for themselves. So quick intro, clap, you got it. All right, we got Brandie Ekren from Traverse City Light and Power, give it up. We have Megan Hess from We the People. We have Natalie Hayes from Michigan League of Conservation Voters. And we have Jesse Deer and Water. Jesse, do you have an organization you represent or yourself?
Well, I have a couple, but I'm assuming that I'm here on behalf of Citizens Resistance at Fermi 2, Craft.
Craft, give it up for Jesse. Awesome, and then I'm gonna hand it off to Brandie to introduce a little bit more about what she does. I don't know, to speak.
Hello? Oh, great, that works. That was a little, okay, interfere, okay, perfect, is that good?
We're good.
So I'm Brandie Ekren. I'm the Executive Director for Traverse City Light and Power, and I'm pretty much responsible for the utilities operations and their vision and their future moving forward. Just a few things about Traverse City Light and Power. We're a municipally owned utility, so we're not an investor-owned utility. So that means that our ratepayers are our owners and help manage and pretty much guide the direction of the utility. A couple of things that I'm really proud of is that we actually have a 100% renewable goal that is set for 2040, and we have an intermittent goal of being 40% renewable by 2025. And as of today, we're committed at 43%. So obviously that's the fuel piece. I have to admit, I actually am a fan of industry, but we'll talk a little bit about that because I got hopes for it. But we're also working on what I would consider a climate action plan when it comes to the utility. And so obviously we have very ambitious goals, but figuring out how we're going to get there and what it's going to look like for the sustainable future is kind of what's on our plate these days.
We're not rehearsed. Okay. Thanks, Brandie. My name is Megan Hess. I'm the Rural Organizing Director at We the People. Use she, her pronouns. Also a Sioux Tribe citizen, rolling down today from Sault Ste. Marie, and I'm on the steering committee for the state's new environmental justice legislative caucus. The work that we do at We the People is organizing, it's community organizing. And that, like, for us is really in the surface of economic and racial justice, but like there's no denying the very clear, bright links to climate justice in that and climate change. And just to like make explicit a theme that actually we've talked a little bit about on the edges, we do power building. I think about the climate crisis is actually like a power crisis for white working class and Black and brown people. Holly mentioned it in the intro, there's a very specific set of people who hold a lot of power who make decisions. And so when we think about the climate crisis, it is about like the effects of weather and what that means, housing and what that means for jobs, but it's also like, what's the power that we have to build to change it? So that's the work of We the People. And I think I'll hold my other things for when we get into it. And Natalie, I'll pass it over to you.
Is this on? Oh my goodness, it is. Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Hayes. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Northern Michigan Regional Coordinator at the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. I am about all things community organizing. I have been organizing up here specifically in Grand Traverse County, but also the surrounding counties for about 5 years now. One of the really great things about Michigan LCD is that we can collaborate on pretty much everything. I should like put this closer to myself. There we go. But really, we're about protecting and uplifting the voices of those most impacted by the climate crisis, whether that's water, land, really anything similar to that. So I'm really lucky to be sitting with some really great folks today. So I will stop talking now and hand it over to you.
Hello. All right. CO, everybody. My name is Jesse Deerenwater. I'm actually a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, and I live in Redford, Michigan. I originally come from a community that was impacted by a uranium processing plant. It's now like a Superfund site in need of great remediation. And that kind of brings me to the work that I'm doing now with Citizens Resistance at Fermi 2, CRAFT. Opposed the operation of the Fermi 2 nuclear power plant in Monroe and would like to see it shut down. The power that be produced by it be produced by renewable resources, preferably rooftop solar, with some sort of community ownership or at least say over the grid. Like to see the waste secured on the Great Lakes, no more nuclear generation. Myself, I live in Redford, Michigan, which is like right next to Detroit. I'm a father of 3, an active member in the urban Indian community of Detroit. I actually sit on the board of the North American Indian Association of Detroit. Yeah, I mean, I'll go into a little bit more about the story myself and craft. You know, we were, yeah, go, but yeah. So,
Awesome.
But
Thank you, everyone, for those great introductions. We'll get started right away with the questions. And this question can be answered by anyone on the panel. It's supposed to be a casual conversation. And remember, for folks in the audience, to be thinking of questions for later. So what is local action, and what does that look like in the work you all do? Anyone take it? Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
Thank you all. Local action looks like a lot of different things to me. It looks like engaging your community. It means talking to your people, helping to build the capacity of your peoples, you know what I mean? So that people understand things, people can talk about things. It's also about community, building your community. You know what I mean? That's local action for me, is building your community. Like who are your people? You know what I mean? Who are the people that are impacted? Who are the people that want to see the similar changes? You know, and then also coalition. You know what I mean? Locally, it's like who do you have that are already working on the different issues? You know, and so for me, local action looks like community, capacity, and coalition in action during that. So I'll go ahead and pass it on.
Yeah, and I will also add on to that. I think it's really about building those relationships with people that share the same values, and also having those really difficult conversations sometimes to kind of come together and really hone in on what is important to us as a group, but also to each other. And I do think, you know, with local action, that could look like rapid response when things are coming up super fast, as I'm sure all of us have experienced in this work before. You can go back to those relationships that you have built previously and really like bring that into this work and say, hey, you know, I talked to you last week about this really important issue. Our commissioners are working on this right now. Can you take action with us? So I think local action, it's really, like you said, it's about community building, and it's about building those genuine relationships with folks, your neighbors, essentially.
I'm not a local action organizer or activist, but I have had a lot of experience engaging with various groups from all walks of life. And what I would say is that local action and the best impact is taking the opportunity to look at those people who are making decisions, who are evaluating and engaging in some educational conversation. Even if it's a matter of introducing yourself and impact, and I think we heard that as a theme through the early part of this piece, but I really do think it's important. I think we can definitely organize a protest. We can put together groups that will put out campaigns and information. But at the end of the day, being able to sit across the table from somebody and ask them, please educate me and help me understand so that I'm making an informed decision is, I think, one of the best ways for local action to make the most impact.
Yeah, and kind of going into that, maybe for folks who aren't so familiar with community organizing, what are some of the type of tactics that you would use to engage a community? Where are we talking to these people? How do we find the people that may not have the resources to try to, sorry, there's an airplane going ahead. Often the people that are impacted by things like environmental racism, pollution, they don't have the financial resources to get involved. So how do we find those people and get them to the halls of power where they can make a difference?
I'm so scared of this microphone now with all of us sitting close together. I'll jump in a little, and Hudson, this maybe gets into some of the next question that we had taken up, but like, this isn't like splashy, like newspaper worthy work all the time. And it happens like in really small ways, not just in the big like movements that we study. And I think about this kind of in two different ways. One is like the things that people can do together as a collective that like builds the capacity and skill that Jesse was talking about. That's really important for collective action. And this is the stuff that's like, in terms of like climate change, right? And addressing climate change, this is like the community garden work. This is the let's have a carpool. This is the like bike lanes for communities, like the small things that do add up, but that like one of the important things in that is that it's practice for collective action. And it's practice in like building the muscle and skill for folks. The other thing that I think about is the small but really powerful ways that people can intervene in decision-making spaces. And so that's not just at the state legislature, right? In these sort of like impressive like policy making, whatever, with the facades and the domes and the columns and all of that. But this is like a handful of moms showing up to a county commission meeting. And like, I will tell you from firsthand experience that county commissioners, if they have like 3 people show up, they freeze because they're like, oh shit, there's people here watching. So like, it's not the like, it doesn't have to be at the scale that like makes the front page of the Detroit News. It's like building in those small ways over time that gets us to like scaffolds to the scale that we're talking about when we're intervening in the state legislature and when we're intervening in those like policymaking spaces.
Yeah, I think that's really important. All of this starts with meetings, local community meetings, local groups, just people getting together and saying, what are the steps we have to take? Going into our next question, and maybe Brandie, you can lead with this. Utilities have an interesting stake in the climate fight. And something a lot of folks are asking is where or when does collaboration and community engagement fall into the planning of these climate actions for smaller or more local utilities?
So the quick answer is concurrently. I think concurrently in the planning process, there's various roles and various opportunities for stakeholder engagement. Definitely in the beginning when we're setting goals, and it's a matter of being able to identify who our stakeholders are. And when I'm talking about stakeholders, I'm talking about different varieties of individuals, whether they be advocates, whether they be people who are, I would say, blockers of goals, whether they be people who are investors. One, being able to identify who is going to be impacted by the decisions and the planning that is going to be made. And so one, I think being able to be visible in terms of what the initial goals are, with the understanding that they're going to change. They may change perspective-wise. And then as you move through the process, being able to educate, whether it be public open house engagements, whether it be one-on-one, whether it be an opportunity to take feedback in any particular fashion that's comfortable for the person that's willing to share, and then also be able to have a two-way dialogue. And that two-way dialogue is being able to communicate back this is where we are, this is how it's going to impact you, give me some feedback. And then obviously, planning, I think something is continual. And so obviously we set goals, we set plans, but being able to execute and then monitor and still be able to get stakeholder engagement and feedback along the way is so instrumental. I think that's one of the trends in the utility industry right now, is being able to add emphasis on that customer experience. And what we're learning is that the customer experience is diverse. It is something that you need to look at from an individualized perspective. And so being able to continuously get that feedback, and what I like to say is being comfortable hearing what you don't want to hear. And, once you're able to get to that point and know that feedback is feedback, and it also means that being inclusive in feedback means, it doesn't mean that we're all going to agree. It means that whether we agree to disagree, but at least we know why we're disagreeing and where those particular points are. So I think the short and the quick answer is continuously. And that's really, I think, one of the values of a municipally owned utility, is that local access is a little bit easier. I absolutely love and adore my investor-owned brothers and sisters. They collaborate with us and definitely are offering solutions as well. But that is one of the values of having your own municipally owned utility, is that you do have easier access.
I'm going to follow up on that. Can you kind of explain the difference between a municipal utility and maybe an investor-owned utility like DT or consumers, and why you have more access that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So investor-owned utilities are regulated by the Michigan Public Service Commission. They still have the same goals in terms of being able to provide energy to their customers and to be able to provide it at, I would say, a cost. But there are also investors, and I say investor owns, that do receive a dividend or some sort of profit. Now, I say this not necessarily that it's a bad thing, because most of those investors are using those investor funds to turn into innovative programs, meaning that they're taking those investor dollars to keep it off the rate base to invest it in, renewables, innovative solutions. A municipally owned utility does not report and is not regulated by the Michigan Public Service Commission. It's regulated by a local board. We happen to have a board that was appointed that's separate from the Traverse City Commission, and they actually act kind of as our rate making authority and our policy making authority. We still do obviously make, I don't want to use the word profit, but there is a gain that goes beyond cost, but we immediately turn it back into operations. So to some extent, it makes investing a little bit more difficult, because we're trying to keep those costs as thin and as small as possible while still being able to function. We've got the same needs and the same requirements as an investor-owned utility, but our access to capital is a little smaller. We've got a smaller footprint. And Traverse City happens to be a relatively small utility. And so when I say that you have easier access, one of the things that we're subject to is the Open Meetings Act. So all of our board meetings are open to the public. Public is able to come in and give comment. And here in Traverse City, public can actually give comment as we go through our agenda. In an investor-owned utility, there still are opportunities to provide some feedback, but the difference is that those decision makers are right here in your community. I cannot necessarily say that might be the case for a larger utility, so to speak. And like I said, this is, they're integral partners and they're part of this as well. I think someone had made a comment, this isn't a competition, but they're part of this as well. And so when you are getting coffee with your decision maker at the local coffee shop, or your kids are attending the same school, you happen to have a different perspective, and there's a different connectivity, so to speak, with those that I would say own your utility.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Before moving on to the next question, does anyone else want to chime in on anything to do with utilities?
Brandie, I don't think I ever knew all of the ins and outs of that. So I just appreciate you sharing some of that too. And I think the piece that is important for on my end, and we talk about local action and organizing, is all of those places are intervention points or like moments where local people can hold their energy providers accountable. So that it's not like the energy system isn't just a thing that we are like passive participants in, but rather like for local action, though all of those moments or all of those places are places where I assume right people can show up and say what their feedback is and perhaps like influence elections for the appointed board if the provider isn't doing what they feel like they should be.
Thank you. So solutions are at the center of the work we do. We want to solve these problems, but how do we solve our climate crisis and center racial justice and equity? That should be core to all the policies and practices that this movement advocates for. How do we as a movement identify and advocate for real people and justice-centered solutions? Go ahead, Jesse.
Earlier, Marnice had spoke about white supremacy culture and how that impacts, you know what I mean, and the impacts of that. And one of the things that we're going to need to do, it looks like, is to kind of like look at things in a different, you know, from a different point of view. You know, before we looked at everything, and a lot of us still do. You know, we're looking at what we can get now. You know what I mean? What's going to benefit our pockets? You know what I mean? And what's going to benefit our pockets now, as opposed to like the long run. And, you know, coming into this from a nuclear abolitionist point of view, indigenous people across the world have bore the brunt of the uranium mining and the nuclear fuel chain all the way across the board. How is that gonna, you know, how are we gonna be able to change these things? And so it's really gonna take community involvement and also community say. You know, there has to be a way to where the people from the communities are not coerced or tricked into things. And that's just going to take open conversations, and it's going to take two-way conversations too, like you mentioned. And it's not just, and it can't just be listening to the community people. It has to actually be like taking the suggestions, taking the solutions and doing something with them. You know what I mean? Trying to wrap your own minds and your hearts around it as you go. You know, try to wrap your minds and your hearts and your spirits around what other people are kind of like saying. You know, the people that are impacted have been taking the brunt of all the different things. You know, we really, really, really need to put our egos down. You know what I mean? And then like pick up our hearts. You know what I mean? Pick up our minds, pick up our ears, and begin to listen and to give people the time to come up with these solutions, and you know what I mean, explain and share. And then, yeah, I don't know if that doesn't seem like it's in the technical jargon realm of what you all might be looking for, but it's more in like the real, like, you know what I mean, like where we are as human beings, where we are as beings on this earth, interact with all of creation. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And often, a lot of the times, folks are chosen for committees for these advisory roles, and it's kind of used as like a green light to go ahead and do what these corporations were going to do anyway. So your point about that, we have to figure out ways to not just have people listen, but to actually take those suggestions. And to me, that means we need those leaders to be in those positions of power in the first place. And that's where it gets really tough. Does anyone have anything else to add on how we get folks into those leadership positions to make those decisions so we can make the right decision the first time?
Hudson, you literally said what I was going to say, so thank you for that. But yeah, I really do think it's about listening and taking a step back and being able to lift up other people and other voices and making sure that, one, they're at the table initially when those conversations are happening.
And it's an election year. And I know it's been, I'll echo some themes right from the panel before. And like the landscape in the Michigan legislature matters deeply, and the landscape in Congress matters deeply, and who's there. All of those people though come from local office, and all of those people come from local appointed boards, and they're coming from tribal governments, and they're coming from like all of those decision-making spaces. And like those are like the people who have developed the muscle to put together a community garden can bring that same muscle to bear when it comes to getting their folks elected to those local offices, and can bring that same muscle to bear when it comes to then elevating, right, and bringing those folks to the state legislature, for example. And all of that has ripple effects because that's who appoints like all of the decision-making boards and like who shape policy. So it's the like laying the groundwork for me becomes really important, and developing leadership and organizing capacity for collective action at the ground level translates like all the way up.
So actually, I can't really add too much to what my colleagues already have just said, but I think one of the key components that I just want to underscore is that the conversation is turning into a holistic conversation. It's, we have the science and the statistics about the disparate impact when it comes to activities that are impacting the environment, but how those activities also impact different community groups, and being able to see the data and what that looks like, I think has really moved the conversation. I feel like we've had to now say, oh, well, the science has said this, the statistics have said that, before people will take a look. And so being able to look at what is the disparate impact on certain policies within certain communities? What are things that you're seeing that deal with health? Health, obviously it can definitely be fueled by genetics. But the thing is there are some environmental issues too that result from health within certain communities. And so being able to have that knowledge and that science and that data, I think is a great way to help move that conversation forward.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I want to emphasize one point Megan made, and this is my new favorite line. If you can organize a community garden, you can run for office and you can be the difference. Trust me, I go to DC, I talk to our congressional delegation, and a lot of people in this room would be a lot better than those folks in DC right now. So please, please, please don't ever think that you couldn't do it, that you're not good enough or you're not smart enough or anything like that, because you all are already doing this type of work and you can run for office and be that change. Moving to our next question, the racial and geographic makeup of who is at these decision-making tables is something that the climate movement has been rightly called out for, and why the environmental justice movement was created. How important is diversity at the tables within organizations within the movement?
I will offer one thought, but I know that like there's other folks here who have feelings. The risk of false solutions is too high, and the people who are directly impacted, like having a seat at the table, means that we don't fall for that shit. To be frank, right? Like the carbon credits that companies can purchase don't change the fact that people living in 48217 on the south side of Detroit are going to have lower rates of asthma and cancer. Like that's a false solution. So it is like absolutely critical that people who are directly impacted are also the people who are like sitting front and center at the table. And I like, from like the Native community, like I know families who have been told that they can't exercise their treaty protected rights to fish because the fish are too polluted because of the waters they swim in. And that's because of the steel mill across the river in Sioux, Ontario, where I live. And that's because of the paper mill that was there and the tannery that was there, right? So like if the people who aren't directly impacted aren't at the table, we get fed these like terrible kind of shitty false solutions that don't actually change what it is that we're dealing with.
And one thing I'll add to this too, I think that it's also going to take a lot of accountability with each other and also examining the spaces that we are in and saying who is missing at the table, who do we need to bring in to have another opinion on this, or to share their story and share the impact of whatever is facing them. We have to be able to hold each other accountable on this too.
Jesse, it's important to have all the voices at the table. It's important. It's also important to have all the ideas of the voices walking away from the table into the decision-making places. And it's also important to have the ideas, the people, the faces, and the names, and all that stuff be part of the decision-making, and not to tokenize, people. Because just to try to get that, it's like, yeah, we got a native or a poor person or this, that, or the other, it's all good. You know what I mean? That makes it. And it's like, no, there are many people from many communities who have many voices, sometimes even opposing voices within those communities, and so there has to be like also a process for bringing the people on too. You can't just go out and pick your most pro-industry native from a community who has who has some pull, who will get the, who will help get whatever mining permit done. That's even worse than tokenizing. That's like some seditious stuff. But yeah. So we need to look at our processes. We need to look at the ways that that we're going about these. The sense of urgency, the instant gratification, you got to drop that. You can't. It's just moving forward. There's a lot. So all I got to say is that we need people at the tables. We need the perspectives at the tables, but also we need the ideas to walk away from the tables to the decision-making places. And those ideas need to be put in. I could say a whole lot more, but I won't.
Thank you, Jesse. Our final question before we get into the audience questions. We often, in the climate movement, we get really, doom-centric, but there's a lot of opportunities as we build this clean energy future to build a better world. So what do you all envision for our future as we work together to create a better, cleaner future? Take it.
Definitely a shift in consciousness. You know what I mean? We're gonna have to do a lot. We have to do a lot, and build tearing down barriers, walls, and as I was telling Megan earlier, our backyard fences. Hell, let's create gardens and let's share space with each other. You know what I mean? Let's like get to know each other, stuff like that. And that's all I got.
So I have kids. And so for me, it is like, what do I imagine them? Like them, right? Like their faces and their eyes, like what can I see them doing? And the like one of the most graspable things that for me has been really important to think about is like, I want my kids 30 years from now to measure success in society completely different. Like, I don't want them to say, oh, it's the bottom line of some like elite corporation's financial statement. That is like, that's the measure of success, or like whatever the GDP is. That's like interesting to think about, but like, I want my kids to be able to say, oh, I'm measuring the success of this thing that I'm working on based on like it helping my community thrive, or based on like, us securing reparations for communities, or I'm measuring success on, I don't know, like how many languages have been revitalized, like, but just like reframing how we understand what like success looks like in the future. Like I want my children to be able to do that, like in really concrete terms.
Anyone else before audience questions?
So what I actually envision for the future, and I'm going to take a step back just a bit, and I think Jesse and Megan can definitely probably attest to this, but I think, most indigenous roots and cultures say that we really borrow our planet. We never own it. And this sense of owning property is something that we have pretty much, we've developed amongst ourselves. And sometimes I think, this energy crisis, these wars, there's social injustice, is an opportunity for our planet to speak to itself, to respond and to react. In terms of, this is our opportunity to perhaps drop the walls, drop our notions of ownership and possession, and look at how do we communicate and thrive as a community that's not necessarily materialistic or something that we touch. And so, for one perspective, that's just kind of one of my personal perspectives, and so with that in mind, my vision, and it's something that I envision for my sons and their sons and their daughters, is that they will live in a future where there is energy independence. You don't see too many people fighting over the sun, at least not yet, right? And so it might happen, but the thing is right now, when you look at these resources, and there is this convergence of the need to collaborate across the aisles. And I mean political aisles, whether you are in an electric industry or a gas industry. Right now, people are being forced to communicate and collaborate and see and talk to each other. And I think it's because we as a people have become so divided because of this sense of ownership that we have lost sight in really what perhaps a purposeful life really is. And so that's my vision. My vision is that my sons will have a purposeful life, and it will be one that won't be tied to materialistic attributes or necessarily what they do, but how they feel about the life and the world that they're living in.
Natalie or Jesse before? Anything?
I'll just echo what everyone else has said on this panel. I think you all summed that up beautifully, and I feel the same way.
Awesome. Now we're going to go to our audience section. Does anyone have any questions about anything that just happened for our panelists?
Hi, my name is Tina with EDF Action. I'm the organizer here in Michigan. Just wanted to put it out to the panel to talk to you about, and for you to talk to us about some ways that you have seen are effective in combating climate anxiety. With all the things that are going on surrounding climate, what are some ways that you recommend that folks combat climate anxiety?
An easy one.
Yeah, I'll attempt a couple half-formed sentences, maybe. So that's felt on an emotional level. And actually, Hudson, you said something earlier, and like other people have said this too. Like some of that responsibility for that climate anxiety is on us. Because like as people who have like stepped up into leadership and taken responsibility for like moving other people in dealing with the climate crisis, we told stories and we told doom and gloom stories, and we told like all the risks and what's possible, and like we highlight like cities going without water, but like the responsibility actually that I think we need to lean into is like answering the question that we kind of just talked about, right? It's like, but what is actually a possible like hopeful alternative to that? And like, how can we feel that possibility on an emotional level? Because like people aren't showing up for shit if they're scared, right? With the anxiety that you're talking about, like that immobilizes people. But like, we're sitting in this room, so I'm assuming everybody like to some extent has stepped up into leadership in this way. Like, how are we helping people feel like in their guts and in their hearts what is possible if actually like we're making some of the changes that we're talking about? Like, what is the vision? How are you articulating? How are people like, can you speak to them in a way that is like aspirational? It's not just about the risk, but like what becomes possible on a planet if we are like achieving the things that we just talked about with local action, or achieving the things that they talked about on the panel before. Like what actually becomes possible that's like beautiful and miraculous and like hopeful and aspirational.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Maria Dozier. I'm a master's student at the School for Environment and Sustainability. I specialize in environmental justice and policy, and I also work with local governments. And I wanted to go back to a conversation we were having earlier about community engagement and organizing. In my work, I feel as though we are reaching a crisis of choice where people have to decide between issues and also decide between, can I show up for this or do I have to focus on myself, my family, picking up my kids from school? How do I make this commission meeting, etc.? And so my question for you is, how do we truly coalesce and bring people to the table when there are these crises of choice?
So I think one of the simplest ways is being able to find kind of what that common denominator of interest is as an intro. Being able, I think, to kind of identify certain similarities of interest and having discussions, I think is really kind of the first step. I mean, that's my opinion. I think humans have a natural ability to want to coagulate and come together as a group. And usually it's what that commonality of interest is. And then I think the question becomes, how does that commonality of interest translates differently amongst different groups? And I know a couple panelists have talked about, simplifying terms, like what this means for me. And I think really being able to simplify and find the commonality where there is commonality is the first step.
It's not really an answer to that as much as it is, that's a symptom of the sickness of the society, is that the people have too much going on. You know what I mean? They can't handle it. It's no resources, no support. And I mean, it's not like that for everyone, you know what I mean? But that's one of the symptoms, you know what I mean, of the sickness, is that people can't make the decisions, or they don't have the time, you know what I mean? Or even the mental capacity to even sort out through certain decisions, And so that's all I have to say about it.
I'll just answer super briefly. I deeply feel what you're saying. And like burnout is so real and so dangerous. And like for me, the only antidote to that is more capacity. And that just requires more leaders and like developing their skill and their capacity. And they in turn can develop more leaders in their skill and their capacity. Like I cannot do all the things, and neither can you, and like neither can any of us. But like the work of like collective action isn't just about like moving people around strategically and like getting 50 people to show up at a meeting and then like letting them all go, but like developing each and every one of those individual people as leaders to like strengthen the capacity that we have. Because I need a break and you need a break, right? So like we need other folks and we need their skill and we need their like organizing muscle.
Yeah, I definitely need a break. Any more audience questions? Sir in the green.
Actually, that great question around, how can we carve out time and space and energy and resources to get involved, made me want to ask the question of, are there some barriers that you've seen be able to be addressed or knocked down to move someone from, yes, I care, and I actually have a little time to get involved. I don't have all the time, but I can offer some of my time or some of my story or expertise, but I feel like it won't make a difference, or I have another, barrier that either from an organizer's perspective or a decision maker perspective, you're like, actually, here's a good way to get the technical assistance you need, because it's very complicated jargon, and we can go to this resource and understand it, or here's another tool to allow you to make the time to get involved, or to have resources to compensate for your time. Just wondering if there's any, like, even if it's just little things that kind of help address some of those barriers when you have someone that is ready to make the leap and, put some of their time toward it.
So the first thing that my mind went to is about volunteering. I've had folks in the past where they're like, I got to pick my kids up from school. I have to make dinner. Is there a way that I can join virtually? And that's where Zoom comes in. I have been able to work with people all over the state with all different types of work schedules. I've had folks on my Zoom make dinner, but they're also getting a really great training in what it is like to be an organizer. So meeting people where they're at and offering another option for them to join, instead of saying, no, so sorry, we can only do this in person, or we can only do it this way. I think opening up to other options, making sure that we're meeting folks where we're at, and having more opportunities for people to be engaged with the work that we do. And Zoom has been really great in that. Even call-in options. That's where my mind went to. I'm not sure if folks have other thoughts on that, but that's what I was thinking of.
I want to add just that briefly, because I think the additional piece is mentoring. I think looking for mentorship opportunities, or more specifically, look for an opportunity to be a mentor. And a mentor doesn't, I don't think necessarily has to be anyone that's in any particular square peg, but I think being an opportunity to mentor and communicate, sometimes you're mentoring and you don't even realize it. And it is just a matter of, someone wanting to talk and share, and you'd be surprised with the potential impact or influence that you may be having in someone's life and someone's passion. You may ignite something, but looking at mentorship opportunities and being able to communicate and share, I think is definitely key. And I love being able to look at the flexibility in the virtual platforms, because it doesn't always have to be in person. It can be on the phone. It can be virtually. It can be via letter. It can be via email. And, I just feel it's like what did you say? We're building leaders. We're not necessarily building followers. And so I just, want to underscore the opportunity to mentor each other.
Yeah. Well, I just want to, go ahead, Jesse.
I was going to throw some stuff your way. I work with a lot of impacted folks. I work with academic folks, different science folks, who to grab the information and stuff, and the know-how, and understand the different workings of the nuclear issues, and some of it's complicated, some of these equations, which are actually proprietary information that some people never get a hold of, we won't understand, unless that's what you study. But the other things are simple. There's pollution, there's contamination, there's anthropogenic heat, there's thermal pollution. There's all these different things that if folks could just understand what they are. So basically it's breaking down the information, making the information accessible, asking the questions, what folks do and don't understand. And even just the simple listening, because a lot of the times the questions that folks have are just really simple questions that they just want really simple answers to. The Zoom stuff is really good. And I was going to touch on that, because there are people who are technologically challenged, or don't have good internet, or can't even afford internet, and so how do you get them involved? You know what I mean? Well, first, the relationship building thing is really key, because then you have these personal relationships with folks. You can find out what it is folks need. You know what I mean? You need a ride to this meeting. You know what I mean? Do you need, you need a little help trying to figure out how to use Zoom? You know what I mean? Do you need a little help trying to figure out how to get into a Google Doc? You know what I mean? Do you even want to mess with Google Docs? So there's all these little, there's lots of different, what's a Google Doc? Exactly. So there's lots of different little things we can do. We can also, you can help people with gas money to get to meetings. You know what I mean? You can pay for people's time. You know what I mean? that's a barrier. You know, money is a barrier because people have to spend so much time making money in order to spend it back on these things that we use, you know, I mean, in life. And so, yeah, just the accessible information, you know, what I mean, building relationships with folks, all that. Yeah, sorry.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more quick question before we wrap up. I saw a hand first back here.
Thank you. I guess it's more of a comment in regards to dealing with the climate anxiety. I really encourage people to get connected with an organization, with a group, local, national, whatever it is that you feel aligned with, and that you know, that you can be part of that whole organization. For myself, I got involved with Citizens Climate Lobby about 6 years ago. And it was key for me because I was looking for somebody that was dealing with carbon, and they were focused. And, you know, I'm a father, a grandfather, and my anxiety of looking away for so many years, even though I knew that this was coming, my anxiety was so much that I had to find a way to deal with it. And since I've become a advocate, a member with CCL, you know, I'm a follower. I have my little moments of leadership, you know, in the local community, doing things, doing tabling, doing this. But I've learned that there's people that know so much more about it than me, and I'm learning continually about CCL works primarily on the federal level. And this is something that I never knew about before. You know, I had no conception of it. And tomorrow I'm going to their conference, you know, in DC for the 4th time. So I guess my point is, you know, really don't be a loner in it. I've been a loner, and it's much better to be part of, you know, a group that can help you out and you can help them out. So thank you.
Thank you. And that's a perfect. Go ahead, Jesse.
I was going to say something on the climate anxiety earlier. This is serious. This is real. This is real to me, and this is real to my people. You know, I see a lot of privilege in the world whenever people look at the climate disaster that's coming. You know what I mean? It's going to wreck your world. You're scared, ain't you? You know what? Indigenous people of the Americas have already seen the end of our world. You know what I mean? We lived through it. We're still here. You know what I mean? So like whenever I think of another disaster coming, I think of another end of the world coming, I think about how my people survived it. I think of all the things that we did to survive it. You know what I mean? And I think that if we do that again, or if we team up together as all people here on this land, we can do that too. We can survive a disaster, a climate disaster, or we can prevent one. We can divert one. So yeah, that and climate anxiety, action is one thing. Building your community, getting with your people, so you know that when stuff goes down, you guys got each other's backs, and you're living on the same values and principles. That's what keeps me going, because that's what kept my people going from before, when our world ended and we got introduced into this new world. I'm sitting here now. So yeah, it's that's all. You know what I mean? Action, community, all that.
And that's all we have time for this awesome panel. Give it our panel another round of applause. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.